we like formally define chain abstraction as a user experience exempt from the manual processes required to interact with multiple chains. So that just basically means I should be able to use multiple chains without bridging and without needing to actually manage multiple different balances. So I should be able to go to Base and have my balance on Base and use that same balance on Polygon, on Ethereum, on Solana, on whatever many app chains. I just have my balance and I use it across the entire ecosystem.
GM, and get ready to be amazed by an 18-year-old who's taking the world by storm. From global conferences to mastering the language of blockchain, he's the one to watch and learn from. Humble, brilliant, and a true crypto native, meet Ethan, or as you might know him from Twitter, Tabasco. If you're serious about making it in crypto, this is the episode you don't want to miss. We'll talk about his journey, dive into chain abstraction, and explore what's next at Particle Network. Welcome to BlockHunters Voices. I'm your host for today, Joachim Bourgeau. Ethan, it's great to see you, my man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Let's do it. Let's kick things off with your story. Who's Ethan and what was like before you dove into the crypto world?
Yeah, I appreciate the flattering introduction. I think my story and my journey into crypto is interesting, and it definitely is a little bit less conventional. I think there's a lot of like younger people in crypto, as I'll talk about in a second, in terms of like the opportunities. But I kind of stumbled into Web3. Like I never really had the intention of like being in Web3 for a long time. It just kind of like happened. So I basically like, it kind of began during the pandemic. I think near like when Dogecoin started gaining a lot of traction. I think this was like 2020, maybe 2019, 2021, like the span of a few years where Dogecoin hit this like, I think it went from like, I don't know, some hundredth of a cent to, 1 cent, 2 cents, and then eventually it got up to $1. But there was this huge pump, and this also followed with a big pump in Bitcoin. And so there was like national headlines about Dogecoin and stuff like this. And so I started looking into it, and I wanted to invest a little bit, but I couldn't at the time because I think I was 15 actually. And so I wasn't old enough to create a Binance account and buy Dogecoin. And I was like, I want to invest in this, but I can't. So I started getting into mining. I started mining Dogecoin on my computer. And so I got really deep into like the Dogecoin community and talked to them in Discord a lot. And I spent pretty much, like for months, I spent a huge chunk of my day like just sitting in Discord and talking about Dogecoin and watching Dogecoin content and watching the price and mining. And then eventually I got my parents to open an account and they invested a little bit for me. And so I was kind of like in crypto at that point, all because I wanted to basically buy a meme coin and I thought it was interesting and I wanted to make a little bit of money from it. And so it was an interesting entry point. And being in like starting with mining kind of got me a little bit more into the technical aspect of it. And I decided, I was like, well, like blockchain, like this, to be honest, I made my initial investment in Dogecoin when I mined went a little bit high and I sold some of it. And then I kind of didn't hold much of it. And this was before it went to $1. So I think I sold most of it at like 2 cents. And that was a mistake because then I think 2 months later it went to $1 or whatever, which was insane. But I decided to migrate a little bit from like the more trading speculative side over to the technical side because I started doing a lot more research into like blockchain and like the actual technology that is driving this that I've been engaging with for the past few months, and started researching that and watching a lot of YouTube videos and doing more deeper dives into underlying blockchain technology. And so this led me into more like looking into actually building decentralized applications. And so I wanted to build something, but I had very limited programming understanding. And so I started kind of relearning and going back to things like Python and JavaScript, which I had some very rudimentary understanding of, but I bought courses and stuff like that to Python to start, and I did JavaScript and I did Java, and to try to like learn as much programming as I could because I wanted to build applications on blockchain because it was an interesting space to me, and it was just there wasn't really like a financial incentive. Like I actually had no, especially after like moving away from trading, I had no like idea of I want to do this because I want to like take advantage of Web3 and like get in on this opportunity and build something that makes revenue. I just found it genuinely interesting, and I wanted to build something that was decentralized and like submitted transactions to the blockchain. That idea was interesting to me, and so I learned Python and I learned these different languages, and I started building an application. And the first application I decided to build was called Amity DeFi. It's actually still live today. I don't really maintain it, but it was the first app that I built, and this was a Discord bot, because my life revolved around Discord. I spent all my time on Discord. That's where I engage with like crypto communities, with the Dogecoin
In the trenches.
And I was in the trenches. That's where I started. And so I spent a lot of time there. I was like, well, I'll build a Discord bot, because I saw like some. This isn't really as big of a term anymore, but back then, I mean, like, 4 years ago or whatever. But there is like a lot of tip bots. Like there was tip.gg, I think, on Discord, and there was like a bot into the Dogecoin server. And so I wanted to build a bot that basically gave you a wallet on Discord that you could use to send like cryptocurrency to people. You can send any token on any network. You can like airdrop to tokens to people. This, of course, has been like, this idea has been evolved a lot today. You have like a lot of Telegram wallets and these huge products that are building similar things. But back then I wanted to do something kind of that nature on Discord. And so I did, and that's kind of what Amity DeFi started as. The first version was very, very bad, to be honest. It was super slow, and it only supported Bitcoin and Litecoin and Dogecoin. And it was very poor because I didn't really know what I was doing. And so I kind of left it for a while, and I fell out of crypto for a few months. And what happened was that once the pandemic started, I was doing remote high school. So I like just went into my freshman year of high school, and I was doing it remotely because I couldn't go in person, and I really enjoyed that. So I actually didn't want to go back to in-person high school once everything started opening back up. But my parents were concerned that if I don't go back to in-person high school and I spend all my time doing remote learning and just like playing video games and doing cryptocurrency stuff, then I'm not going to have enough like interaction. And so the deal was, I can do remote high school and I can stay doing all the things that I wanted to do, but I need to go get an in-person job. So I need to go actually like start working. And I had just turned 16. And so like this was the deal that I had to make. And I was fine with this because at the time, because I had never worked before. And so I started working at a tire shop that worked like, it was like a 5-minute walk from where I live. And at that tire shop, my job basically was to take tires off, put new tires on, fix holes in tires. Like, it was a very physical, intense job. Very
real hardworking man job, right?
Yeah, it was, because you have to like haul wheels around, and like you have these huge hydraulic machines and stuff like that. And so I tried that, and I hated it. It was my nightmare. I hated waking up and going and having to go do that. I did like 25 hours a week, but it was I really disliked doing that. But I couldn't. I would rather do that at that point than go back to like in-person school, go back to like real high school. And so
what didn't you like in-person high school? For me, I really enjoyed it, so that's why I'm asking. Really good experience.
Yeah.
All my friends are from high school, most of my friends, 80%.
Yeah, I never actually went to an in-person high school. The last time I was ever at an in-person school was actually during middle school. And I never really enjoyed that. I had a few friends, but I was always very interested in like, niche video game things, stuff like this. And I was never really into like the popular things or whatever. And so I was, I don't know. I just never had I never like had a big friend group or anything during middle school. And so I didn't really want to go back into that during high school. And especially being a year late, I didn't want to like have to build new friend groups. And it was just kind of like daunting to me. And so I was just like, I don't want to go through all that. So I just rather work. And that's a little bit easier for me just from a social perspective. And so, but because I hated changing tires so much, I basically reached an ultimatum where I was like, listen, I can't change tires for 25 hours a week anymore. As like, as a small of a task it
Enough
sounds,
is enough.
that was basically, it was like, this is enough. I can't do it anymore. It's too physically intensive. Because like doing that, I would finish work and you'd wear these gloves and like my knuckles would be bleeding because like, I mean, you're hitting rubber tires all day and like you're just throwing stuff around. And so that it's like, I know most people that's like their day-to-day stuff, but for me, I'm not a very like athletic. I'm like 135 pounds. And so it just was not, it was not a very fun experience for me. And so I was like, well, I like programming a lot and I enjoy like sitting on the computer. And this is really what I want to do all day. And so I was like, and I've been doing this crypto thing for a while. Like I have this application that I built and it's okay. And so I spent more time, as I began working there, I spent a lot more time building out Amity DeFi and building out that application. And it got to a point where I like tore down the entire thing. I rebuilt it a few different times. And I got pretty lucky because it actually got implemented in some pretty big servers. It actually was really popular in the Harmony One community. If you remember that project is dead now, unfortunately, but it was big back in like 2021, and it had a lot of traction. It had like the sharding approach and people like this, and had DeFi kingdoms and these big applications. And so I built the bot mostly to cater towards that community, and it actually got added to like all of the major projects in the ecosystem. A lot of people used it, had a big kind of community of users. It built its own sort of like ecosystem around itself. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And again, I was making no money off this. It was like a totally free tool, and I was paying out of pocket for all of the server costs, for everything associated with it. I was just using the money that I was making from working at this tire shop to pay for the uptime of this bot, which it didn't cost that much. But I just enjoyed the experience of like people using something that I built, and like it was just like a cool thing for me. And so I did that for a long time, but I realized working in this tire shop, I was like, okay, I built this application up, and I kind of understand like how blockchains work. And I built this application for, at that point, I'd been building it for like a year. And so why don't I just like try to work in Web3? And so it was all out of pure hatred for changing tires. I didn't like really want to work in Web3 that badly, but I was just like, I don't want to go back to school, and I don't want to change tires anymore. So this
It's
is
the
my
exact
only way out.
opposite.
Yeah, exactly. It's like this is my way out. This is something that I might enjoy doing. I don't know. And so I applied for like 200 jobs. I mean, literally everything I could find on LinkedIn. And my resume wasn't very good. It was, I built this application with like 1,000 users, and I work in a tire shop. Like, who wants to hire me? And so it was like it wasn't a very good value proposition, to be honest. But I applied to like literally everything I could find on LinkedIn, and eventually I got very lucky in that I got a position at an RPC provider called Chainstack, and I did developer relations over there. And so I started off basically at a very low level, just learning the industry. From an RPC provider perspective, it's a very different vantage point from like a project like Particle Network, where it's centralized. It's a centralized provider of a service. It's a software as a service product, and so it gave me a very like bird's eye view of the industry from a lot of different perspectives. And so I spent a lot of time doing that, and I really enjoyed it. Like, I wasn't sure how I was going to like it. I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to do long term, but month after month, I got kind of more into it. And I spent all day doing it. I didn't really want to do anything else, and so eventually at Chainstack, I grew to lead the developer relations team over there after working there for about a year. And so I led a team of 3 people or so, and I really enjoyed it and had a lot of fun doing that.
And you actually work with another colleague that works at Particle Network right now.
I do, right? Yeah. Actually, one of our developer relations guys was somebody that I worked with at Chainstack. His name is David.
Yeah. I met him in Singapore, and he told me that you two were colleagues at Chainstack.
He actually just moved over to Particle like 4 months ago, and so he stayed there a lot longer than I did. But I worked with him for like a year and a half. Basically, my whole time at Chainstack, I worked with him. And so he does great DevRel, and so we wanted to bring him on board at Chainstack. But yeah, like, I worked with some fantastic people there. A lot of the people that I worked with there on the developer relations team, they work at Ava Labs, at Layer Zero, at Nethermind. Of course, David now works at Particle. And so there was a lot of fantastic connections from that. I learned a lot in that position. Like, basically, I learned the entire industry. I learned how everything works, at least to the capacity that I could. I led a team over there, and so I enjoyed that. So after being at that company for about a year and a half, I got a message from a recruiter that told me about Particle Network. And I had met Particle Network, I think at ETH Denver. And so I was loosely familiar with like what they did. And like at that point, Particle was very focused around social logins and account abstraction. And so I was pretty interested in user experience and like more user-centric on-chain technologies, as I had originally built whenever I started in Web3 a few years prior. I built on-chain tech. I built kind of more user-focused tech. And so I wanted to kind of go back into that space with Particle. And so I did an interview, and I really enjoyed it. And basically, like 2 days after I did the interview with Particle, I got on a flight to San Francisco and met with the CEO in person. And we had a great chat. And then we went there. I went there for a day, and then I flew back that evening. And I was like, okay, I want to join. Particle is very aligned with my vision for the space and what I think the direction Web3 is going in. And so I joined Particle. I've been at Particle now for I guess, almost a year and a half, maybe a year and I don't know, a year and 2 or 3 months or something like that. And so I lead developer relations at Particle. I did developer relations for a long time and eventually moved to lead the team over here. And so it's been a lot of fun. It's been a crazy journey. I've worked in crypto for now, I guess around 3.5 years, almost 4 years. And so it's been nuts. It's been crazy.
What was very curious for me, because I have these talks and I talk with a lot of people, and of course there are those OGs that are in crypto from 2010 or something, but most of them are from 2020. So basically COVID onboarded a lot of the players in crypto right now.
Yeah, I think it was like, because you didn't really have anything else to do during that time. So it was like naturally, it was COVID plus like the bull market started hitting. And so I think it just like created a lot of natural attention and like funneled people towards the space. I don't hope that another COVID happens, but I hope that we see another like, another year where just like a bunch of people on board. Cause I mean, the timing was right. It was like, there's all of these coins pumping. There might be a good opportunity here. I have nothing else to do. And so I get into crypto. And I think a lot of people had that same experience. Like if you ask a lot of people, when did you get in crypto? Most people say, oh, I got in crypto 2020, 2021, because that was the time where a lot of people were on board. And I think the space expanded a lot. And so, I think it was COVID, of course, was, it wasn't a good thing, but for me, it was a positive funnel into
Life-changing.
into this. Exactly. Yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Was it tough to get people to take you seriously when you started out in crypto?
I don't think it was. To be honest, I never told anybody how old I was for a long time. I started working in crypto when I was 16, and so I just like conveniently left that information out whenever I would talk to people. And I think most people, yeah, like I present myself as somebody that like typically, like most people wouldn't guess that I'm, even right now I'm 18 years. I look basically the same when I was 16, and so most people wouldn't guess that I was 16, and they thought I was older. And so I just never told people. And so it wasn't until I was like really 18 and where I really told people, I was like, hey, by the way, I'm actually 18. I think I did maybe one interview when I was 16 where I said my age. But other than that, I like basically just kept it silent. Like the only people that knew was like my team, and that was it. I was a little bit more anonymous. Like the name Tabasco comes from because when I first started in this space, I actually was fully anonymous. And so I didn't show my face. I didn't ever say my real name. That's changed now, of course. But so I was very like secretive about my age, except for my own team. And then eventually, especially once I turned 18, I was like, okay, well, it's like I'm technically like an adult now, so I can be more open about it. And I found that like it's actually kind of more of an interesting thing than it was a detriment. So for me, I never, because I wasn't very expressive about it, I don't think people got to the point where they took me less seriously because they just never knew. I think for myself, it was a little bit like, especially once I first started getting it, like I first started Web3, everything felt very it was just like bigger than myself. Like it was difficult to like get in the space and like level with everything. It just like everything was just like massive to me, and like it's just like this huge high level. Everybody's much smarter than I am, and so it was difficult to adapt to that. But I think, I mean, at this point, I've been, like I said, working in the space for over 3 years, and so it took me a few years to like really like synchronize with the space and feel like confident in the space. But and in terms of myself and my working in the space, but I think of course now I'm at a point where I'm very open. I did a tweet. I don't know, maybe it was 3 or 4 weeks ago where I said,
I saw that tweet. That was wow, man.
Because even like I don't talk about it that much, but one night I was like, you know what? I don't know. I'll just tweet about it and see like what people think. And so I was like, by the way, guys, I'm 18 actually. And that tweet got like 200 likes. I wasn't expecting it to get like that much attention. Got like 50 comments. It was nuts. And so I was like, oh, maybe I should talk about this more because it seems to be interesting to people.
It's encouraging, man. I mean, it's one of the only industries in the world where it's based on meritocracy. So if you are good, it doesn't matter where you're from, it doesn't matter your age, you just have to be good. Rather than the traditional industries where you have to have a lot of experience in the field, a lot of college degrees, somebody who can vouch for you, and
Yeah, I think that is something that like Web3, it's quite unique about Web3. I think it's very aligned with like the whole like kind of more casual decentralized ethos, which is that like, and to be honest, I'm not the only like person that started in Web3, that working Web3 under 18. I actually know a number of people that did. Even I forget, I don't know what his name is, but he the one of the engineers for Eigenlayer, he's very popular in the space. He's also like, the guy's like 16 and he's much more
Oh
successful
yeah,
than you
yeah.
know, he's insane. And so like there's a lot of cases like this in Web3, and I think because it is like, there are a lot of talented people out there that in traditional industries are handicapped because, like you said, if you walk into like most Web2 industries and say, hey, by the way, I'm 16 and I want a job here and I built these things, like, can I give it a try? Most of them will, they're going to laugh you out of the room because it's just like, your age is enough to basically discredit you. But in Web3, that isn't necessarily the case. And so I think that that opens up a lot of opportunities and creates a very diverse space in terms of age. Like, I've worked with people that are younger than me. I worked with, like, as being 18, I've worked with people that are just getting in that space now that are 16 or 17. And I've also worked with people that are like, 20 or 30 years older than I am. This is just like, because the space doesn't matter. It doesn't care about this. It's just like, what value can you create? What are you actually bringing to the space? And this is what matters more than anything. And so I think Web3 is unique in this regard. And, I intend to play out my career in Web3. And so I think I've been lucky to stumble across a space that takes that approach, because it allowed me to start things much earlier than I could if I decided to stick to Web2.
Can you share a memorable challenge or learning experience from your early days in the industry? Like, how did it shape your perspective?
Yeah, I think probably the number one thing that I learned, especially throughout my time. Now, like I said, my experience with Web3 is a little bit diverse because I started at a centralized provider and went to a more decentralized on-chain protocol. And so these, like, it might seem like a small change, but from an actual working perspective, it's massive. It's the difference between the two, and the day-to-day is just insane. And so throughout my time, I got to interact with a lot of different types of people, a lot of different types of organizations. I've spent a lot of time in Solana. I spent a lot of time in EVM chains. I've been everywhere because of like that diversity. And the number one thing I've learned is like most people in crypto don't really know what they're doing. And this is like the number one thing. And this makes it much easier whenever you're working crypto. Is like, it might seem like everybody's like just like this very intelligent crypto engineering mastermind, but most people, they have a very specific skill set and they're great at some specific things. But I think most people in Web3 are just learning and trying to push the space forward in the way that they can, in the same way that and that I was at the time. Because whenever I got in the space, I was like, I'm so far behind everybody. And then I realized I was like, well, like everybody is kind of like, not everybody's on the level playing field, but like everybody is also learning at a similar pace that I am. The space is still very early. And so nobody is like very few people are like truly, I won't say nobody, very few people are truly experts and like they have just, immense knowledge about Web3. I think everybody's learning. And so knowing this and understanding this and understanding that, like, yeah, like especially at that point, and even today, like there's still a lot that I need to know, but everybody is on a very similar level that I am. Or
it's
at least
a learning
like
curve, man.
Exactly. Yeah. Like that made it a lot easier for me to navigate the space and like, I guess to just feel confident in the space, especially in those early years that I started working. So that was like gaining that confidence was probably the biggest challenge, especially like in that first year of me working full time in this space. But once I realized that, and after I had really interacted with all these different parts of the industry and understood that everybody is learning at basically the same pace that I am, that it allowed me to really unlock and be a little bit more kind of proactive in this space. I think that resulted in a lot more growth than what otherwise.
For the 16 and 20 years olds out there thinking about dropping out or struggling to break into crypto, what advice would you give to them? Any tips for nailing, I don't know, their first interviews, their first meetings one-on-one, and stuff like that?
I think what a lot of people like, and I've only done 2 interviews, or like I've only interviewed with 2 companies in Web3. One was Chainstack and the other one was Particle.
Oh, and
so,
you nailed it both.
Yeah, because I think a lot of the time people, and I did a few years ago, I did like a big podcast about like how to actually start working on Web3. And this actually applies to most industries. I think people don't spend enough time like preparing or researching for interviews. Like I would take days.
Superficial.
Yeah, it's just like you go in there and you expect like, okay, they're just gonna ask me questions, they're gonna answer it, and like that will be good enough.
You have to ask the questions.
exactly.
It's
And
the
you
other
need
way
to,
around.
yeah, like you need to actually, like if you want to work somewhere, like you should actually want to work there. Like you should have a reason for wanting to be a part of that specific project. And so like with Particle, at that point, whenever Particle approached me, a year and a half ago or whatever, I had been receiving a lot of offers at that point. And this is the nature of developer relations. It's just like, it's a very sought after role in Web3. Everybody wants a DevRel. There's not many to go around. And so I had a lot of protocols that reached out to me. I said no to all of them. It wasn't until I found a protocol that I felt personally aligned with and that I felt actually had a genuine vision for the space that I wanted to be a part of, which was Particle at that time, that I decided to actually go through with an interview. I know not everybody has the luxury of like being really picky about this, but if you generally want to be a part of a specific organization, Web3, like know why you're actually doing that interview, know why you're actually like trying to be a part of that organization. Do research into like exactly what do they do, play around with their technology, actually go and use it, go and look into their history, like how was that organization founded, who founded it, like who are their backers, what does that journey look like, and then like be armed with that knowledge going into the interview. And like again, I know it's probably said a lot, but it's like you're not like begging for a position. Like, I mean, you should be at a position that you feel confident about. So like, again, as was mentioned, like to some degree, you're also interviewing the organization because like, I mean, you need to work somewhere that you feel confident in. And so like, you need to be asking questions about that organization, especially, and this is really important in Web3 because a lot of organizations are pretty shady and maybe don't want to be working for them. And so it's just like, I mean, you should have genuine interest. And most importantly, if you acknowledge that and you go into the interview and you're asking questions and you're very knowledgeable about actually what it is that you're interviewing for, the number one thing to actually prove that you're capable is just to prove that you can generate value. Maybe even like literally present exactly how you're going to do that. I think most people just expect that their personality or their Twitter presence or whatever
Twitter
their
presence is
has.
important though, right?
It's important for sure, but like you need to actually express and articulate like how are you going to uniquely bring value to this organization. And if you can't do that, I think it's very difficult. Like you can't expect somebody to like basically articulate that for you. I mean, you have to like basically explain it specifically. I found this like this combination of like being able to very clearly articulate value and how you see your position and you're adding to an organization actually improving their value generation and actually improving their position alongside going into that interview and going into that position armed with like very deep knowledge about what it is that you're actually getting into. This is what enables like being able to work in Web3. Web3 is a relatively competitive industry in terms of jobs. A lot of people want to work in Web3. And so if you can prove value, if you can like prove that you're willing to take the extra time to like look into this organization, ask questions about it, really understand it deeply, and just like, say yes to as much stuff as you can, just like be super proactive, like do as much stuff as you can. And this will always like put you above the 200 other people that are applying for that position because most people are lazy. Most people are not going to take the extra 30 minutes or the extra hour to like look into an organization, take a lot of notes about it, come up with like a plan for expressing value and like go into something with like a structured idea of how you're going to execute it. Most people are not willing to do this. This is just the reality of it. So if you take that extra time, if you put in an extra effort, then I think most of the time that'll be reflected in the ease of actually getting through these interviews and end up getting in positions of Web3. It's just about like showing that you're willing to do more than others, and then of course actually following through with that. And so I think that's the thing that most people tend to miss.
We've talked briefly about how you end up at Particle Network. For those who might not know, can you give us a simple explanation of what Particle Network does, what problem it's trying to solve in the crypto world?
Yeah, absolutely. Particle, especially when I first joined Particle, we've always been a user experience focused organization. When I first joined Particle, it was still a relatively new organization at that point. I think it's been around for maybe 3.5 years, close to 4 years. And so when I first joined, we were very centered around social logins, so onboarding to applications using your Google account, your email, your Twitter, paired with account abstraction. So specifically onboarding to applications using your Google account, using your email into an ERC 437 smart account. So this creates a very unique and Web2 friendly user experience because you go to an application, you click Google, you click on your Google account, now you have a smart account. that can do gasless transactions. Like there's no pop-ups, all these cool things. And so it allows applications to create a very unique experience. And this was our focus for a long time. Even after I joined, this continued to be the focus, and we gained a lot of adoption in that regard. But basically around a year ago at this point, we decided to expand our stack and kind of evolve to a new focus, which we felt like encompassed maybe a deeper problem in Web3 beyond just like surface level user experience, which is basically user and liquidity fragmentation. And I spent all day talking about and thinking about the trajectory of Web3 and fragmentation, because basically the way that Web3 is moving, and we recognized this about a year ago when we decided to make this expansion into, as I'll get into, the idea of chain abstraction. We recognize that like Web3 is on a course towards thousands of blockchains. Like there's new rollups every week, like major rollups that are launching. We just saw Kraken is launching one, and Uniswap and Paradigm announced another. Everybody's launching rollups, and this was even a trend back a year ago. Modularity is making it easier and making it more viable to launch application-specific blockchains and rollups and things of this nature. And so this is clearly a trend in the ecosystem. And as more chains are introduced, and as we move away from the idea that we're going to have just one blockchain to roll them all, or one state machine, and we start moving towards this idea of like multi-chain distributed blockchains, then there's this fundamental problem that is yet to be addressed, which is user and liquidity fragmentation. It's the fact that as a user, I have a balance on Base and I have a balance on Ethereum, and these balances are distinctly different from each other, and they don't translate at all to Polygon or some app chain that I'm using. Every blockchain that I use and every application on each of these different blockchains, these blockchains have isolated states. And so the apps that I'm using on Base have my Base balance. The apps that I'm using on Polygon have my Polygon balance. And then I need to, if I ever want to use apps that are on different chains, I need to bridge between these chains and maintain different balances. And so it is a massive headache for end users, because it's like, I not only need to cognitively manage all of the balances that I'm using, but I need to actually manually bridge between these chains if I want to get them to different experiences and to different apps. And this is only going to be more exaggerated and be more severe with the increase in the number of chains. If there's 1,000 blockchains and each of them are application specific, I have to bridge every time I move between an application or on-ramp or something. This is ridiculous. This is like not sustainable from a user experience perspective. It also, beyond user experience, it creates, like, I won't get too into it, but it creates misaligned incentives, because it encourages applications to build for like niche user bases, and it discourages innovation. And there's all these, like, we've written a lot about this, but like fragmentation is a source of a lot of Web3's biggest problems right now, especially with the growth of app chains and more rollups. And so what we decided to build, and what has grown to be a very big vertical now, was a chain abstraction solution. So chain abstraction is just the idea that a user should be able to use applications without really needing to know the underlying chain that they're using. Specifically, we defined it, we like formally define chain abstraction as a user experience exempt from the manual processes required to interact with multiple chains. So that just basically means I should be able to use multiple chains without bridging, and without needing to actually manage multiple different balances. So I should be able to go to Base and have my balance on Base and use that same balance on Polygon, on Ethereum, on Solana, on whatever many app chains. I just have my balance and I use it across the entire ecosystem. This is the essence and the idea of chain abstraction. And so we started, like, we weren't the first in this vertical. I think Everclear was like the first to create this name, but we were very early to the chain abstraction vertical. And so we kind of started with what we now call universal accounts. And so universal accounts are our kind of account-based chain abstraction solution, where we basically give users an account that is applicable across all chains and maintains a unified balance across all chains. So it is exactly what I mentioned. It's basically a smart account, because we have a big history in account abstraction. So we decided to kind of evolve that towards chain abstraction. It's a smart account that gives you the same balance on every chain. That's the essence. It allows you to use every chain without bridging. This is essentially what we're building, and this is kind of how universal accounts are positioned.
Do you want at some point to integrate fiat as well? Basically to have euros and chain abstracted cryptocurrencies in the same wallet?
Yeah, like universal accounts are basically just like contracts coordinated by, it gets a little bit complicated, but they're basically just like coordinated smart contract accounts. Like, this is maybe an easy way to say it. So universal accounts are relatively low level infrastructure, but we're building applications on top of these, and developers are building applications on top of universal accounts that will implement fiat very seamlessly. So we're actually thinking about building our own application where like you can on-ramp very easily. You can use Apple Pay, whatever. We have some partners that are going to be using universal accounts that are going to be building applications that have very similar, like I can onboard using or on-ramp using Apple Pay and these types of things in like 2 clicks. And so that translates into USDT. That USDT or that USDC is unified because of the properties of universal accounts. And so this is a trend that we're seeing like move very quickly, which is that people want, especially newer users, they want very easy ways of actually getting funds into their account, especially through things like Apple Pay or Google Pay or whatever. And so like we are building for this, but within our implementations of universal accounts. Universal accounts are a neutral kind of infrastructure, the kind of low level. And so the things that we're building on top of those ourselves, along with many other projects, a lot of which they do implement like really easy and native fiat support.
And the universal accounts are basically Particle's main products, but you also have universal liquidity and universal gas features.
Yeah, so you can think of like universal account as basically like the actual smart account itself, right? And this is like the single account and identity that I have across these chains. Universal liquidity is basically what we, like the terminology that we use to refer to the technology that enables the kind of a single balance property of a universal account, right? The property that allows the universal account to maintain the same balance across every chain. And so basically how universal liquidity works, without getting too technical, we could if you want, but basically at a very base, like simple format, universal liquidity just automatically bridges across chains to make it feel like you have unified balance. And so if let's say I want to buy an NFT on Polygon, and I have that NFT is worth $10. I have $5 on Base and $5 on, Arbitrum. Basically, what universal liquidity will do is it'll say, okay, well, you want to buy an NFT for $10 on Polygon. You have $5 on Base, $5 on Arbitrum. So I know that you can afford the NFT. So like the user just sees, okay, I have $10. I can buy the NFT with that. In the background, what universal liquidity does is it automatically bridges that $5 from Base, that $5 from Arbitrum into Polygon and buys the NFT. And so universal liquidity is basically just automated bridging that happens to satisfy the condition of a given transaction. And so if I want to spend X amount and I have X amount spread across these different chains or on some external chain, universal liquidity bridges that for me, moves that to this chain that I want to use, and then executes that transaction. And as a user, it feels like I have one balance across all these chains, but really what's happening in the background is that there's just this very fast coordination of assets across chains that like basically makes it feel as if they're all on a single chain. So this is essentially how universal liquidity works.
But you need solvers to do this, right?
Yep. Yeah, we use
Can you explain exactly what are solvers? I know they are something similar to flash loans, but I'm not really technical, so.
Yeah, so we use the term solver. What I think is probably typically a better term from a technical standpoint is filler, especially in the way that we use it. Filler is a little bit easier to kind of conceptualize. Basically, the way that our system works, it isn't like traditional bridging. It's not like a mint and burn bridging. So it's actually very distinct from like what you would typically consider to be normal bridging. We use a solver system to basically say like, whenever I want to move, we can go back to the example of like, I have $5 on Base, I have $5 on Arbitrum, I want to do a transaction for $10 on Polygon. Like if we use that example, a filler, basically what it'll say is it'll say, okay, like I see that this user wants to spend $10 on Polygon and has $5 in these 2 other chains. As the filler, I have liquidity that can supply that $10 transaction on Polygon. So as a filler, I have $10 in my balance on Polygon, like the actual filler entity itself. And so I can pay for this transaction. And so it will. The filler will say, okay, like fine, I'll pay for your transaction on Polygon. And I'm going to repay myself using the funds that you have on Base and the funds that you have in Arbitrum, plus a small fee, right? So it's saying, I will basically be the intermediary here for you to pay for your transaction on Polygon and repay myself with whatever chains you want to give me the funds on. That will equate $10. And then I will, plus a small fee to basically reward me for doing this for you and taking the risk attached to that if there's any, right? And so the filler is a very fast way to move funds across chains because it's just essentially an off-chain entity that is saying, I will supply this transaction for you and I will pay myself back using the funds that you have on these chains that you want to use. And so in this example, it'll basically supply the liquidity needed for the transaction on Polygon and pay itself back using $5 on Base and $5 on Arbitrum plus a small fee. And then there you go. the transaction is complete. This model allows funds to be moved across chains like super quickly. It's basically like under 5 to 10 seconds typically, sometimes even faster. And it's relatively low risk. The only thing is that it moves things off chain, which is there's a huge conversation and like vertical around solvers and risks and optimizing this. It's a very deep conversation, but we use this model because it makes a very simple and easy way to actually implement like the perception of chain abstraction when you have this really fast and efficient like bridging mechanism essentially.
Thank you for this, Ethan. Can you give us a concrete example of how a project is using Particles products? Maybe walk us through one or two partnerships and explain how they're actually going to implement Particles tech in their projects.
Yeah, so a lot of the projects that we had use our social login stack and our account abstraction stack. They're going to be some of the first that will kind of graduate to using universal accounts. So we have a lot of partners in this regard, like Galaxy uses our social logins, Moonveil, which is a pretty big gaming app. Over time, there's a number of different DeFi applications that use it. And so basically what we're expecting is that essentially once we release the SDKs for universal accounts, which we're still at least a month or two away from. So like universal accounts aren't live yet in terms of developer SDKs. There's some main implementations that are built by Particle. But in terms of like external SDKs, it's not completely live just yet. But what we're expecting is that, for example, we're going to see some big gaming projects like Moonveil and a few others that are currently using social logins graduate to universal accounts and therefore be able to like access this property of having universal liquidity. Same thing with like we're having some prediction markets that we're expecting like over time to also implement this, and a few others that have basically agreed to or have at least started exploring the idea of universal accounts. And so basically chain abstraction and universal accounts and all chain abstraction protocols. There's many chain abstraction protocols. Chain abstraction in general to applications. We've spent a lot of time pitching this to applications, especially the applications that we have relationships with, and asking them like, what do you think about this? Is this interesting to you? And what we found is that basically there's a almost unanimous like positive reaction to chain abstraction. And this is because from an application perspective, chain abstraction is almost an objective value unlock, because it's like, well, of course, like if I can get users into my application that have funds elsewhere without needing them to bridge, then this is just like free user acquisition for me. It's free expansion of my addressable market, right? It's like, because previously as an application, I either need to deploy on every chain or I need to just like deploy on one chain and hope that users will bridge into that chain to use my application. Whereas with chain abstraction, you can deploy wherever you want and acquire users from the entire ecosystem, from across the entire ecosystem. They can have funds anywhere. I can have funds in Solana, I can have funds on Base, I can have funds on Poly, it doesn't matter. And I use that application. At that point, the only barrier for the application is convincing people to use the app. There's no need to convince people to bridge or like having to deploy your app on a million different chains. It is literally just have your application with chain abstraction. You can onboard any user from across the entire ecosystem. And so this is almost like a 10 times addressable market unlock for these applications. It's just like, this is instant ability to address users from like anywhere essentially. And so this is a massive value potential increase that we're seeing. And so everybody that we pitch this to, that we pitch universal accounts to, that we pitch chain abstraction to, and we hear a similar sentiment from the other projects that have also been pitching this, it's just like, we're expecting projects to adopt this very quickly once the infrastructure is there and once the infrastructure is ready, because the value proposition is just insane. So we're very excited about this.
I think especially, as you said, games, because games, if you are a non-crypto person, let's be honest, man, it's very hard to get by, You first have to lose some funds to even know what's happening. So how would you acquire user retention if you can't onboard properly the users, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. We're also seeing like trading is going to be, or like DeFi is going to be a big use case as well. Because it's like, especially with like, speculation. I've had some talks about like how I feel speculation is impacting the industry and stuff like that. But from a user perspective, like the fact that I need to like go to bridge to Solana to like buy certain tokens that are native on Solana versus like other chains, bridge to Base, this is also just like, this can be effectively removed with chain abstraction. And actually, this is a big reason why users tend to stay on centralized exchanges, because it's like, I don't need a bridge to like buy some assets on Binance. I just
So you
literally
guys
buy
are
it.
gonna be the killer of centralized exchanges.
This is a big use case for chain abstraction that we're expecting. It's like basically you can achieve that whole experience on chain, and so we're hoping that like this is going to be a big value proposition that's going to be built with chain abstraction early on, alongside like more consumer use cases like gaming and prediction markets and these different things that are proven verticals in Web3. But basically, how we see it is like every vertical, every kind of like type of application in Web3 can essentially be reimagined using chain abstraction. It unlocks a massive design space for these applications. So we're really excited to see how like new types of applications, new like user experiences basically get created just out of the simple property of like literally letting you use your balances without bridging. It seems really small, and it is pretty small, but what it unlocks is insane. And so it's something that we're looking forward to.
As you mentioned earlier, you initially were a service provider, but right now we are building your own layer one chain. Why did you make this shift, and how does it fit into Particle's overall vision?
Yeah, so when we first were very focused on social logins, we actually were a software as a service company. So we basically sold access to social logins based on like a SaaS model. So your number of users, like your monthly active users, that was what we charged you. We just charged you every month for this. And this is like how most existing, still social login or wallet as a service providers, whatever you want to call them, that's how they operate. They're centralized in terms of like their payment model, and they use software as a service and these types of things. Once we realized the potential value proposition of chain abstraction, we decided that like we'll still provide this, but actually we provide social logins for free as just like a public good now, because we realized that like we would rather invest all of our resources and all of our time in building a chain abstraction model, essentially, and building a protocol for specifically universal accounts. And so when we were building universal accounts, we kind of wanted to build a base layer that would power universal accounts that would be capable of coordinating transactions across chains, as to basically allow this idea of universal accounts to be decentralized. And so when you look at Particle Network as an L1, our L1 is basically a decentralized coordination engine. It sounds complicated, but it's actually very simple. It's just a way to basically coordinate cross-chain transactions from a decentralized set of validators and entities. So it is it's a way to like whenever you send a sequence of transactions with universal accounts, that is first settled and validated through the Particle Network L1, and then actually like pushed and settled on external blockchains. And so this was like the first thing that we built, essentially, was this kind of coordination engine for cross-chain transactions for solvers. And so that's what we basically built universal accounts upon. And this is kind of like universal accounts are our main product. And so our base architecture, kind of like our core innovation, was the L1. And of course, we like I mentioned, we built universal accounts on top of that. And so that evolution was just out of the recognition of a bigger opportunity. Social logins, we realized that like we're not the only ones doing social logins. Like we weren't like necessarily like the first ones to ever do this. And so we felt like, and we still feel like we built a pretty killer product in that sector, but like there was a bigger opportunity here to make a bigger impact in Web3 from the same vertical. Like we're still doing user experience. It's just like we're solving a different problem within the user experience sector. We felt this was a bigger problem that we could solve and we could tackle than just exclusively focusing on social logins. And so that's why we moved towards kind of this type of model.
And how does Particle set itself apart from the competition?
Yeah, like, we actually don't have very much competition right now in chain abstraction. Chain abstraction is it's still a pretty small vertical, but it's a pretty collaborative vertical. And so there's a lot of chain abstraction projects, but most of them operate at slightly different parts of the stack. So you have like a lot of application level. We call it, basically, to take a step back, we typically categorize chain abstraction projects in 3 different layers. You have application level chain abstraction, which is more like developer facing. It's a little bit more like SDKs that allow you to do transactions on multiple chains. And you might also hear it referred to as orchestration. It's like orchestrating cross-chain transactions. That's lower level, more developer facing. That's one sector. We don't fit in with that sector necessarily. The second, like middle layer of chain abstraction, is account level chain abstraction. This is where Particle Network sits with universal accounts, because we build chain abstraction targeting user accounts. Also, it is in the scope of developers, but it's more about a user-facing solution. It's a solution that is affecting user accounts universally across applications. Then the last third layer is blockchain level chain abstraction. So it's like the super chain or Aglair or zk-sync elastic chain, like kind of these chain collectives, these rollup clusters that like allow for intrinsic like low risk interoperability. So these three layers are different like approaches to chain abstraction. They work pretty collaboratively. So like we envisioned like the future to be a mixture of these three solutions. You're gonna have account level solutions that work at the user level. You're gonna have application level solutions that allow developers to create like chain agnostic applications, and you're gonna have blockchain level solutions to like enable really true fast interoperability. So our closest competitor is probably something called Magic Accounts from ZeroDev. This is a similar model to what we're doing. It's not the exact same, but it's similar enough to where like we would consider that to be a competitor to universal accounts. It's also a smart account. And so it also unifies balances. It uses something called a chain abstracted balance, which kind of uses an escrow. So it has like its own like chain abstracted balances you can pull from. Right now it's a little bit limited, more limited than universal accounts. We don't have any animosity with that team, but we do view universal accounts to be a more sophisticated solution, at least right now, and is longer along in the roadmap of achieving chain abstraction. We actually did an event during Singapore called Abstract Coffee, which I think you attended.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a lot of fun. You could go in there, you could basically buy a coffee using a unified balance. We would like give you USDT spread across like 4 different chains, and in one transaction you would basically pay for a coffee and it would automatically bridge across. It was a lot of fun. It was a killer experience. And so we ran this coffee shop in Singapore for like 5 days and just like let people come in, get a free coffee, try chain abstraction. And like, so universal accounts are basically done, and they are what I just mentioned. It is like the full, like any token unified balance. It's very complete. And so we would consider ourselves to be the most complete, matured account level solution at the moment on the market. There are some technical differences between like universal accounts and magic accounts. I think developers, like I'm all for competition. I think the market will determine what is the best account level solution. If developers prefer universal accounts, I think we're going to see that reflected in what apps use. If developers prefer magic accounts, then there's adjustments that we need to make to compete with that. This is good. This is actually beneficial for developers and for users, because it means that and the same thing goes for like magic accounts. If people prefer universal accounts, then they're going to adjust. Then we're going to adjust to compete with that. And then eventually it's a better product for everybody. And then we, like, for example, with application level solutions like Socket or Cluster or Agoric, we see ourselves as actually very compatible with these guys and very collaborative. So we work very closely with these like more application level developer centric protocols because we don't compete with them, and we are
complementary,
very complementary. So we have very few competitors, but we feel positively about like the network effects that having the 1 or 2 competitors that we actually do have. I think it's a positive thing.
When I was in Singapore and I was at the cafe to try the chain abstraction coffee, when I used the app, it really seemed like something on mainnet. And I'm wondering, looking ahead, can you share something about the roadmap or any other developments?
Yeah, like what you tried was actually on mainnet. Like that was a fully on mainnet transaction. Yeah, that was a full mainnet transaction. It was real money. And so like universal accounts are already functional on mainnet in our internal environment. So the experience that you tried in Singapore was an internal version of universal accounts. So it was a very, very early build of what we're doing here with universal accounts and of the chain and of our architecture. And so it was functional, and it was functional to a point where you could use it, and it was great. It was using a single solver, but it worked. And so since then it's been a little bit over, I guess, a month, 2 months. And so we've made a lot of progress since then. And I think I can share a little bit of alpha that we haven't shared publicly yet. I won't get like too specific, but basically we're going to be doing so as I mentioned earlier, universal accounts are an infrastructure. They're a neutral, they're just a smart account essentially that is coordinated, that maintains the property of having a unified balance, right? So with that established, the way that we're positioning universal accounts is that we want people to build applications with universal accounts, to build wallets with universal accounts, to build things that take advantage of accounts that have unified balances, right? But also at the same time, I strongly believe that protocols that build infrastructure should also build apps on their infrastructure. So if you're building infrastructure, you should be the first to build something on it, to lead by example, to actually like use your infrastructure, use your protocol that you built to build something, to actually create something. Like don't just like build the infrastructure and then like, look at your watch and wait for somebody to build something else on top of it.
For people to come in and build.
Right, exactly. Like do something with it. If it's really that good, like you should be like the first ones running to like go and build with it. And so we realized we're like, hold on, like we can just release infrastructure, but there's a huge design space here that we can take advantage of from a protocol level, and that we can be the first to build universal accounts. And so give us like 2 or 3 weeks, and we're going to be launching something that is the first mainnet product, real user product that we're very excited about. That is the first like real implementation of universal accounts. And so that is going to be followed very, very quickly by our SDKs. So we're first going to launch this kind of consumer-facing product, the first real implementation of universal accounts. I can't give too much information as to exactly what type of application it's going to be, but it's going to be very, very user-facing, very friendly to brand new users.
A little mystery is good.
Yeah, it's good. I think everybody's going to be very satisfied with it. I think it's going to fit very well into the current landscape, and it's going to be hopefully like sort of a clicking moment for people with chain abstraction. Like I think they're going to try it. They're going to realize they're going to be like, hold on, this is like a next level type of experience. And so we're very confident about that. And so we're going to basically launch that here in a few weeks, and then the week or two after that, we're going to start launching some first versions of our SDKs for public use for anybody to build on top of. And that's going to lead into like full mainnet launch, full SDK launch, and basically before the end of Q4. And so we're progressing very quickly, and we're excited to like basically by, in November, we're going to be launching a big product that I think most people are going to hear about. And so we're really
Will I
excited.
be able to buy meme coins on Solana and Base by just clicking one button, 2 buttons actually?
This is that's a good question. I can't say 100% yes or no, but I think you're on the right track there. It will potentially be possible.
Nice. Outside of our work at a particle network, which actually seems to be 90% of what you do, what are the developments of trends in the crypto space are you most excited about?
I think just from basically my experience in crypto is all infrastructure. I don't really spend that much time like on the more like I focus on infrastructure and things that allow people to build. And so what I'm most excited about is like infrastructural development. Specifically, and this is very in line with chain abstraction and all that stuff, but I actually did a roundtable this morning about alt VMs and app chains and stuff like that. And I think a lot about app chains. And what I'm most excited about is like the trajectory that we're on, like the infrastructural evolution that we're just now seeing, to be honest, where I think most generalized blockchains are going to have trouble being successful in 3 to 5 years. I think in even 5 years, what we're hopefully going to see is like almost every application will have its own rollup. And these are going to have diverse virtual machines, they're going to have diverse DA layers. Like the entirety of Web3 is going to be modularized and existing on like distributed, like isolated block space. And I think this is massive. And this is, I think, the only true path forward for Web3. So this is what I'm most excited about. It's like a future where we literally have thousands and thousands of blockchains that all have their own isolated environments that, for example, like if there's a big blow up or like some big airdrop farming thing, it doesn't take down the rest of the chain. It's just like everybody's in their own isolated environment. There's thousands and thousands of blockchains building on all these different virtual machines, all these different, smart contract languages, SVM, MoveVM, WASM, all these things. And like we see an ecosystem that is built like this, but to an end user, it just feels like a single chain. And so but taking all that apart, I'm really excited for app chains. And for like, I know people are like, for example, whenever people like Kraken announce their rollup, you have all these people like, oh, another rollup. I think it's a good thing. Like, I'm always happy. I'm like, oh, great. Like, I think it's great that like there's another rollup launching. It proves the thesis here, which is like the value isn't owning your stack. And this is being clearly shown and being displayed. So I think over the next few years, we're going to see this massive, just like this huge change in how we view blockchain and how we view the blockchain ecosystem towards this just huge number of app chains and rollups. And this is what I'm really excited about. And so I follow some of the other things in Web3, like AI and crypto. I'm not as big of a fan of all that kind of stuff. I like what I really believe to be the future of Web3, which is like this just hugely distributed like web of individual blockchains that are going to build what we will consider to be Web3 over the next few years. And so I'm very passionate about this type of future.
As someone who grew up with tech, how do you think your Generation Z, views crypto differently from other folks in the crypto industry, like me, who am a millennial, for example?
I think from my, I would probably consider myself to have, I guess it depends on who you ask. I think a lot of Gen Z and even millennials look at crypto from a very speculative lens. I don't think this is a negative thing at all, by the way. I just don't personally align with that much. And I think I tend to align myself a little bit more with like kind of the, some of the older folks in the space, or just like those that have been in the space for longer, which is like actually why I got into Web3 was because of speculation. So I think like this is why a lot of like Gen Z and like some of the newer generations, they get into crypto because they're speculative, because they want to make some money. But the reason why I stayed in Web3 was because of blockchain, and to be honest, it was because
of vibes.
And the vibes. It was because of the values that blockchain stood for, and actually what was being enabled here. Like, decentralized coordination, being able to actually spend and hold funds in a way that is like separate from state, being able to like instantly send funds to somebody from across the world without any intermediaries, like peer to peer. These things, I think, in a lot of cases, especially some of the newer generations, like Gen Z, has lost sight of like the whole reason like why blockchain and crypto was started in the first place, which was like to solve massive fundamental financial issues and problems that we've had. Like I watched this interview with the Eigenlayer founder, and he talked about like how crypto is more than just a financial asset. Even it's a mechanism of decentralized coordination. And I agree with this thesis as well. I think that like blockchain has massive implications for how we format financial systems, how we format communities of people, and just how like industries are going to be defined moving forward. How every industry operates, I think, can be redefined or enhanced by decentralization and by blockchain. And so I align myself with these values a lot more than I do like being excited about a meme coin launched by an AI. Like this doesn't excite me that much, to be completely honest. I totally get like why people like that, and I think it has a place, and I think it's probably a net positive for the industry. A lot of people would disagree with me on that, but I don't see it as a negative thing. I see it as generally a positive thing. But myself, I tend to align more with like kind of the OGs, some of the older people in crypto, which is more aligned with like the core values that blockchain has. This is why I've stayed in Web3. It isn't because of speculation. It's because I really do feel aligned with that. And that's what captured my interest after I got over the Dogecoin craze, when I first joined. So.
Use your attention 101.
Yeah, exactly. But I think a lot of people, they stick with they get on board because of speculation, which I think is a good thing, and they stick with that, which isn't a bad thing. But for me specifically, I think I took a different path. But like, to be honest, if Web3 wasn't speculative, I would have never gotten into Web3. So I totally understand that positioning as well.
Paint me a picture with where the crypto industry will be in the next 5 years.
My hope is that basically we're going to have solved the two biggest problems in Web3, which is scalability and its user experience. I think we're on a very clear trajectory to solve this in the next like 16 months. Some people would even argue that we've already solved this to some degree. I think in the next 5 years, my hope is that from an actual application perspective, there's going to be a massive industry of applications that use Web3, but don't feel like Web3, that you don't even know are using Web3, but are decentralized or use properties of decentralization, or have on-chain assets, or doing something on-chain, or are entirely on-chain. And so I think we're going to see new types of applications be built, existing applications be just reimagined to some degree using Web3, because if these problems are solved, then there's no constraints anymore. And so I think we're going to see a lot of existing consumers be onboarded in Web3 without even knowing that they're being onboarded in Web3. I think this is like really how...
That's the dream, man.
That's the dream, right? Yeah, I think like Web3 should be integrated within existing systems to a point where like everybody's using Web3, but they don't even know it. Like there's been some early examples of this, like off the grid. I don't know if you heard about this from the Avalanche ecosystem, was a huge game in the Web2 space that has on-chain assets, but nobody really knew this. I mean, but it's all built on Avalanche L1. And so I think this is a trend that we're going to start seeing more of, which is like applications that take advantage of Web3 that really use the unique properties of blockchain that I mentioned a moment ago and what we built here, but create experiences that are better because of that, or that are more resilient because of that. But people don't need to like explicitly know and understand the fact that they're actually using Web3. It just works for them. And so this is
I
the
think
future. That
I think Counter-Strike can do something similar because they have that whole marketplace for items and stuff, right?
yeah,
I'm not a gamer myself, but I have gamer friends and they told me, man, it's crazy what's there.
yeah, that's that I think that was also one of the ideas I thought a lot about in the earlier days was like Counter-Strike skins and stuff like this all on chain, but you don't even know it. And it's like you actually truly own the skin, like
Exactly.
you maintain the value of that, and nobody can take it away from you. And like these are really interesting ideas as well. I think Counter-Strike is a good example of that. And there's like any game with a market, even like I don't know, skins on any game can be applied to the same thing, or it can even go beyond skins. Like this has been one of the early examples, but just like you have just being able to actually host games on chain to some degree and have verifiability on chain. There's all, and this goes beyond games and social media and everything, news, whatever it may be. I think there's so many use cases, censorship resistance and others, that blockchain locks I think we're going to see being used, but not in a way that is advertised to users. They experience the benefits of it without needing to explicitly know that it's Web3 or it's blockchain or whatever. They just use the application. So this is what I think we're going to see in the next like 5 years.
Alrighty, Ethan, enough with all the discussion about chain abstractions. We want to wrap things up with some rapid fire questions to get a sense where your head is at and when it comes to crypto. So just quick top of mind answers for this. What's the most underrated and overrated idea in crypto right now?
I think the most underrated idea is I think still alt VMs. I'm very bullish on that after some of my conversations today and over the past few weeks. I think the most overrated idea is crypto and AI. I've been thinking a lot about this. There's some good use cases that I like a lot. I've actually done some angel investments in like one AI project, but I think 99% of use cases of AI in crypto is a gimmick, and so I think it's very overrated.
Top 3 crypto apps for user experience and cool use cases
that are existing, that are already out there.
Yes.
Polymarket is incredible. I've actually used it myself. I think Farcaster is way better than people sometimes will give it credit for. And I think that OpenSea is actually at a point now, and maybe I've even thrown like Tensor from Solana is at a point now where like the user experience is really good. I think sometimes people don't give it credit for it, but it's very Web2 friendly. Like you can use OpenSea right now and have very little knowledge that things are happening on chain. Like you can use your Google account, log in, fund it with your Apple Pay. It's insane. So I think those are the top 3.
Oh, I didn't even know that. I mean, I use OpenSea regularly because Bera chain NFTs, but I didn't know you can log in with Google.
Yeah, it's dope. They've improved things a lot recently. It's killer.
On what crypto-related topic have you completely changed your mind in the past year?
I think it is meme coins. I've always been very critical of speculation, and especially after I kind of moved away from that part of Web3. I kind of got like this is just like everybody's Web3 for speculation. It felt like very misaligned to me, but I realized, especially over the past 6 months, as this vertical has grown and as I've seen more people congregate around it, I do think it's all financial driven. Like I think a lot of people say, oh, it's community. It is financial driven. If the coin goes to zero, there's no more community. I think people should not pretend otherwise. But I think it does a great job of motivating people to get in Web3, to experience Web3. And I think it to some degree represents it. Like it kind of ties back around to like the values. Web3 is a permissionless system. You can do whatever you want. If people want to launch meme coins, then like I totally support that.
Coins,
yeah, this is how Web3 should be used. Use it however you want. It's an open, decentralized, permissionless system. You should be able to use it. You should be able to speculate on whatever you want. If you want to speculate on, whether or not, some president's going to say some word in some speech, then go spend $10,000 on that. I mean, Web3 is the whole point of what we're building here is that you can truly do whatever you want on chain, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. And so like this meme coins, I think are like, ironically, one of the best representations of this thesis. And so I've changed my mind from that a lot over the past like year or so.
If you could have dinner with any 3 people from the crypto space, who would they be?
Yeah, I read this question on your sheet and I thought about it for a little while, and I was like, I don't know. I think it would have to be, of course, Anatoly from Solana. I think this guy has a really interesting thesis on blockchain. The Solana guys are very different than Ethereum. So I would even say like Anatoly and Vitalik would be two. Then third, I don't know. I think it would either be one of the very early Bitcoin developers. I won't say Satoshi because nobody knows who he is, but or maybe I don't know, maybe some people know. But I would probably be either one of the very early Bitcoin developers, just to have like basically the three horsemen of Web3 like at one table, or it would be somebody with a very diverse experience Web3. So maybe like, I don't know, Andy from the roll up. Like I think this guy has talked to so many people that I'm sure he'd be able to like
He's
drive
a
the
walking
conversation.
encyclopedia, man.
Literally, I've had many conversations with this guy, and like he's seen everything. He knows everything at this point. Like he's seen everything in Web3, and so having like those two plus like somebody like that to be able to drive the conversation, like move things in different directions, I think would be very interesting, especially because like that's what something like him speculates or specializes in. So that would probably be kind of the direction I'd go in if I had to choose.
Thank you for this, Ethan. That's a wrap. I think chain abstraction is the missing piece to onboard the next billion users, right, on chain. So thank you for your time. Thank you for being here. Thank you for actually bringing value to this space, because I think this is the most important thing right now.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having it. It was a great conversation, and I'm glad that we had the chance to have a chat.
Thanks, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.